Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. This is a new venture that I'm trying to start here. Charles Hamaker, of course, with you here. You could tell by the bald. I wanted to sit here and do one of these sort of wrap-up shows that are around there, right, for our Seattle sports teams, because I just really wasn't the biggest fan of the ones that are around there. Um, around there, around here, just because of their lack of inclusion of certain teams, lack of notes on certain pieces of information about certain teams. Like I just felt like the rap shows weren't really doing a lot of rapping, and really only hitting things that they cared about. So, I wanted to take the time. I'm going to call this Around the Sound. It's going to be a daily thing, when there's news pieces on multiple pro teams. We'll probably have versions for minor league and our UW coverage as well. In addition to weekly shows for those teams and different levels of teams. Uh, Going forward, Around the Sound was originally going to be the name of our Seahawks, Sounders weekly show with Owen Murray. Sound Waves from the Sea is what it's called now. I just figured Around the Sound sounded too good for something that was going to be a general thing. And now we're going to do that. So, first of all, we're going to go with our Seahawks. I think we're going to go with how we would do the CSS on Converge weekly show. That will probably change. I'm thinking of doing a model that is sort of the prioritize news by importance. Like if the Seahawks just have like a new merch drop or something, then they would go on the bottom as opposed to the Storm, doing something significant, right? So I think we'll do that going forward. Um, After this episode. So first of all, though, and well, the Seahawks would probably be pretty high on the list for this week anyway. Well, today. So this is Around the Sound, March 5th. It's going to come out in the 6th because obviously we have to get through the day of the 5th to get all the news. So March 5th for the Seahawks was a big day, and it involved a lot of wide receiver news as early into the morning. It was announced that the team had officially released wide receiver Tyler Lockett. He had 1 year left on his deal, was set to make $10 million in base salary and had up to $7 million in roster bonuses. I saw a lot of fans and friends of mine upset about this, and understandably so. I think it's fair to be upset when you lose a favorite player, especially someone that is the caliber of human being that Tyler Lockett is, right? But it makes a lot of sense just because Lockett's cap hit for 2025 was set to be $30 million, just about 30 million, I think a little bit over. And it was the third highest on the team, and at the time, the third highest for any wideout in the league. That doesn't make a lot of sense, especially given his production as of late, right? So, with this move, after a flurry of moves back on the 4th, about four of them, the Seahawks made, releasing Draymond Jones, Roy Robertson Harris, excuse me, um, Rayshawn Jenkins. I'm missing someone else here. I can just go and find this here. Yeah, Seahawks made four moves on 14th, the 4th, sorry, to really clear up some space here. Oh yeah, an offensive tackle, George Fant. So they made those four moves. They really dug themselves out of the little hole that they were in. I think they were about $7 million in the negative for their cap space. And now after the Lockett move, so the Lockett move plus the four releases that they made the day before this Lockett news, they have about $32 million, just over $32.5 million currently in cap space. And obviously, this is big for the team as they look to improve upon their offensive line. They'll have to sign their draft picks. And, they want to improve their team, right? And with Lockett gone, they would probably have to add another wide receiver in some capacity. So that's the news on Tyler Lockett. Obviously, if you know the Seahawks, you know about Tyler Lockett. He started out as a punt returner out of Kansas State, and he finishes with some pretty impressive numbers that we'll look at here, ranking second in team history behind the Hall of Famer Steve Largent in receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. He ranks second in punt return yards. So again, I go back to the return thing from Kansas State in the draft. I think he was a pick 69 in his draft. Nice. Um, make sure my light that I adjusted doesn't look too funny. No, I'm okay. I just look really bald. That's fine. That's normal. He's ranked second in punt return yards as well as average yards per kickoff return at 25.1 and kickoff return for touchdowns with 2. So not a lot going on in that last stat, but still, he's 10th in franchise history in games played and is a three-time winner of the Steve Largent Award, voted on by players and given to the player and or coach who best exemplifies the spirit, dedication, and integrity of the Seattle Seahawks. Um, so, you know, it's a tough move, understandably so, right? I understand why folks are going to be upset about it. Everything you see from it was really cool to see former players talk about Lockett today. Um, Everyone involved in the organization said great things about Tyler Lockett. Um, so it's tough that he's going to be in a different uniform next year. He has stated that he doesn't want to play, so he will be playing somewhere next year. I believe it was he wanted to share the experience of being in the NFL with his new child. So yeah, it's gonna be tough to lose him there. But again, with him turning 32 last December, kind of getting passed up by Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously DK Metcalf as well, and the cap hit. It just makes a lot of sense. So that's tough. And then a few minutes later, there was the Lockett news, and then right after that, this bombshell dropped that wide receiver DK Metcalf has not only requested a trade, but has been granted permission to pursue said trade. So, excuse me, per reports online, excuse me, the request came over the last week or so, as Metcalf's team and the Seahawks have been having contract discussions. As the hope is that Seattle can sign Metcalf to an extension to give them some more cap help. Um, he's entering the final year of a 3-year, $72 million deal that he signed back in the summer of 2022. ESPN's report states that Metcalf's request came after a series of conversations over the past 2 weeks. And then this line in here was very interesting to me, that DK prefers to play for a contender. Now, when I saw this news come out, just the general news about him requesting a trade, I had the knee-jerk reaction was, oh shoot, right? With not shoot, not using the word shoot, really. Um, but the thing about a contender is funny considering that Seattle won 10 games last year. They were a game short of making the playoffs. Um, and Metcalf himself throughout the end of the season spoke to his confidence in head coach Mike McDonald in the future under head coach Mike McDonald. So I don't really buy the whole contender thing unless he wants to win a Super Bowl right now, which, you know, I mean, I understand that part, but the contender thing's kind of interesting. Um, so I don't buy that. I'm wondering how much of this is a ploy just to, use some leverage and extension talks. Excuse me, this dry cough is killing me. So yeah, I don't know. Personally, I don't buy it too much. We'll see how things go. But yeah, I'm intrigued by this to say the least. And the last little bit of Seahawks news for March 5th is that free agent linebacker Ernest Jones IV underwent knee surgery shortly after the regular season. Those reports came out today, and one of his listed agents on Twitter went and confirmed this, but also said that while this is being received in a negative light, this is the best thing that could have happened to him since he got traded to Seattle. So, the surgery that Jones the fourth had cleaned up an injury that he dealt with throughout the course of last season. It's not something that's considered overly serious. And it's thought that he'll be ready to resume football activities by June, if not earlier. So, obviously Ernest Jones the fourth is the team's most important free agent currently. Uh, at the combine last week, General Manager John Schneider said that the Seahawks and Jones's camp had some positive talks, and that they'll continue that this week. Um, so it's interesting to see how that'll go because that's been a big emphasis from really the last few weeks of the season until now. So it's going to be quite fascinating to see how things go there. Obviously, again, mentioned earlier, the Seahawks have cleared up about $32 million in cap space. So, they should be pretty solid, but in terms of, the resources to bring him back. But, I'm sure Jones will want to test free agency and see his market value and things along those lines. So, looking ahead, there's nothing set in stone tomorrow for the team. So really, free agency shouldn't really ramp up until next Wednesday. So some to look forward there. Before we go over there. I guess you could say over there because they're in Peoria, down to the Mariners part of this show. So we move over to the Mariners part of this new show. The Mariners are one of two teams that had a game today. Um, well, this is technically recorded in the early hours of the sixth, but you get the point. Um, Falling by a score of 6-9 to the Kansas City Royals in Surprise, Arizona. In spring training action, the Mariners falling to a spring training record of 5-8. So try not to freak out too much about that. On our last weekly Mariners show episode of Mariner Mondays, uh, we talked a little bit, the three hosts, myself, Brittany Weisner, and Jake Parr, talked about wanting to see more from the regulars in these spring training games because we had talked about how great it was to see the minor leaguers and the prospects generally do so well. We wanted to see some of the guys who are going to be on the big league roster on a consistent basis do something, and we got something in that in this game here between the Mariners and the Royals. Julio Rodriguez, two homers, nice to see. Two homers, uh, both off different pitches, which great, wonderful. And then Cal Raleigh, one hit, and cleared the bases with his one hit, a nice double. So really nice to see that from some of your regulars, guys that will be major contributors for you over the course of the season. Um, and just to make sure they get things going. I know with Julio, he talked to the media after this game, or after he was pulled in this game, because if you're not aware, in spring training, they'll take the regular guys out, usually in the middle of the game or so, or after a certain amount of plate appearances. And usually before they leave, basically, because they come out of the game, and usually they'll just go and sit in the clubhouse. Um, or if they're in Peoria in their own complex, they'll go back to the complex, um, and go and hang out and then go do some work or leave. So as media, we have to go and catch them right after that usually. Um, it was interesting. Julio highlighted being able to get more plate appearances and more swings. Whether it was live ABs, game action, whatever you may have. Um, and he says he feels good. So it's been great to do that. Last year he was dealing with a sore wrist, so that kind of hurt his spring training there. But it's obviously with baseball, you want to get a rhythm. You don't want to really go, having a bad spring training in terms of not being able to see plate appearances for a hitter does have the obvious ability to hurt you, right? There's no rhythm there. You want to be the ability of being able to play every day. You got to get back into that after the off season. Um, so it's nice to see Julio. Um, show some power. He's got four hits in the spring. They're all extra base hits, two doubles, two homers. They've all been above 105 miles per hour in terms of exit velocity. So, and he says he feels good. So that's nice. Um, it's good to see that. Otherwise, in this game, Bryce Miller got the start on the mound in this one. He did give up a two-run homer to MJ Melendez. He's on the new cutter he's working on, which he called the wrong pitch to the wrong hitter. So, uh, you know, I think we've talked about this on the Mariner Monday show as well, that you don't really take too much stock into the spring training numbers, right? I know I just went on this whole thing about Julio and Cal, right? But like with pitchers specifically, he's talked about Bryce just talked about his new cutter. You know, he probably wasn't using his full arsenal in this one, um, and was probably working on things. So, you know. Um, in terms of game action, before I get into anything really team related, because there were some interesting comments today, that dominated the Mariners news cycle. Yeah, looking at the tomorrow's games, later today, when by the time you're seeing this, it's a split squad day for the Mariners in spring training. Some of the players will be on the road against the Diamondbacks, and some of them will be playing at Peoria against the Angels. Both of these start at 5:40 Pacific time, 6:40 Mountain time, if you're using Mountain time. Um, with Oh, shoot, just missed it. The group that's staying at Peoria, featuring at least pitchers wise, Brian Wu, as well as Will Klein, Jesse Hahn, Gregory Santos, who has not pitched in a Cactus League game quite yet. So this is nice to see Gregory Santos pitch in this one, especially since, he's been referred to as some people by just an idea because we really haven't gotten sustained time with Gregory Santos. So him, Soren Lau, Carlos Vargas, Drew Pomeranz, and Austin Kitchen all scheduled to pitch. Um, this game will not be televised, so we want to see Gregory Santos pitch. We're not going to be able to watch this game. It is on the radio on Seattle Sports 710 and Mariners.com. The group that's going to play the Diamondbacks, um, we'll see lefty Jonathan Diaz on the mound, as well as Luis F. Castillo, not to be confused with starter Luis M. Castillo, Neftali Feliz, Hagen Danner, Tyler Cleveland, and Peyton Alford, all scheduled to pitch there. This game will be televised on Root Sports as part of bonus coverage on that network. So that's nice to see. Um, Really quickly, before I get to the main part of this for the Mariners today, some sort of injury cleanup stuff that's kind of been around the last few days, but we'll throw it into this. Leo Rivas has not been playing in games as of late, um, as he sprained his left ankle this past week and not returned to games quite yet. The hope is he's going to return tomorrow, so that should be nice. He has started to increase in his activity since then. Jorge Polanco, who we mentioned in the Mariner Mondays episode last week, has played in his first Cactus League game back on Monday. He hasn't played third base yet, and he probably won't do that until next week. So they want to be cautious with how much he plays in the field early in the season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I'm sure people will react accordingly to that. Um, you know, don't think there's too much outside of much injury stuff going on around here outside of those two guys, really. Yeah, no. So we'll get to the main news of the day. Um, Former Mariner, he spent but just a little under, I think, half the season with the Mariners last year. Justin Turner acquired at the trade deadline. Uh, was played significant at first base, really. The occasional DH, was a guy that was loved in the clubhouse. Mariner fans loved him. Uh, he had some unique comments, we'll say. Bob Nightingale with USA Today put out a column about the Mariners and Justin Turner. And Turner's comments went viral, right? Including the quote, the fact that they missed the playoffs by one game and didn't go out and add an impact bat or two when you have the best pitching staff in baseball just seems absurd to me. Which again, it's not new, but it's obviously interesting to see a player of this caliber, of this popularity, publicly say this on the record. Obviously, it's not really going to affect him as he's with the Cubs now. Um, but it's interesting. Again, this is a guy that was really loved in the clubhouse. Luke Raley said towards the end of last season, I remember being there. I don't think there's a single person that doesn't want him back. He's really changed mindsets. I truly believe if JT was here for the full season, we would be in the playoffs. So, yeah, again, he was really loved. The Mariners did make an offer to him, just like they did with Carlos Santana. In the Seattle Times article about this, their sources say that the Mariners did contact Justin Turner on multiple occasions throughout the offseason with one-year offers that were more than the deal he signed with the Cubs. But he wouldn't commit, so instead they pivoted and went with Donovan Solano and Jorge Polanco. Um, but maybe part of the reason, as this is a quote from Turner, not what I'm saying right now, I'll get to the quote in a second, was he wasn't confident in the fact that Seattle would add around him. Honestly, here's the quote. As much as I wanted to be back there, if I was the only piece they brought back in, I would be saying the same thing. What the hell are we doing? Are you trying? I feel for them. They've got great fans. Their fans are amazing. They want to win so bad. The team is very profitable and they don't spend. Again, this is nothing new. It's just obviously, I'm sure, very vindicating for fans um, to see this from a player this caliber. And Divish did some great work here. Ryan Divish with the Seattle Times in this article talked with some players, none of them that were identified, and asked basically about his comments. Um, a few quotes. He basically said the same things to me earlier. Another player not is asked if he was wrong, not one bit. So and then another player said, "Isn't it every year?" So, yeah. Um, it was interesting though. This is a position that I've held for years, and I've gotten a bad rap for it myself. Was asked about Jerry Dipoto, and he didn't really criticize Jerry. He said, I think Jerry catches a bad rap for a lot of these trades. He doesn't have any money to spend, so he's got to create money. Like, okay, is it really Jerry's fault? So, yeah, very interesting stuff there from Justin Turner. Not at all surprising. Um, just really cool to see that someone said these things. Um, I just doubt it will inspire anyone to do anything, though, in the organization, unfortunately. So, um, with that, we will move on to the Seattle Storm. Our Seattle Storm remain in the off season. We've got some time before we get to the WNBA draft, where the Storm hold the second overall pick and the preseason after that. The team did announce some coaching staff hires. And some promotions, with Perry Huang leaving to join a G League team earlier in the offseason. The team announced the hiring of Mitch Thompson, Elijah Knox, as well as the promotion of Drew Stanich. Mitch Thompson joined Seattle as an assistant coach, while Elijah Knox becomes the newest player development coach for the Storm franchise. Stanich, who was the former director of basketball operations with Seattle, has now been promoted to assistant general manager. Interestingly enough, I know that Pokey Chapman, who is an assistant coach, was the associate general manager previously. So that is interesting. Don't know if that changed here. Let me look at my press release while I'm doing this. Um, Probably a good idea, right? Um, don't know if they said anything about that. Nope, they did not. Um, hmm. Okay. Interesting. Most recently with Miss Thompson, he was an assistant coach for the Stockton Kings in the G League, where he led the top offense in the G League from during the 2023-24 season. He was on the coaching staff also well, before the G League stint, for the Mexico women's national team, assuming the role as associate head coach back in 2022. He was later promoted to head coach, and by the end of his tenure, he helped the team rise from the number 51 spot in the FIBA World Rankings to number 41. So that's pretty cool. Some more on Elijah Knox here. He joins the Storm as a player dev coach after a 3-year stint in Phoenix with the Mercury. So he stays in the W. He was an assistant coach and head of player development there, helping the team improve in field goal, 3-point, and free throw percentages. So some shooting help there for a Seattle team that generally needs to do better shooting. Hence why they brought in some players like Lexi Brown, um, sharpshooter Katie Lou Samuelson, so on and so forth. In this press release from the Storm, it's noted that Knox has a long history of working with pro and collegiate athletes and has helped them prepare for the Olympics, NBA, WNBA, and others. Drew Stanich, who got this promotion, joined this franchise back in 2022 as the director of basketball ops. He spent the last few seasons facilitating the team's operations, as well as assisting with college code scouting. Before Seattle, he was the director of basketball ops for Vanderbilt women's basketball program after serving as the equipment and operations coordinator for the Indiana Fever from the 2013 to 2015 season. So quieter time for Seattle and the Storm right now. You know, it's free agency in the WNBA has really cooled off. So it's not like there's much for the Storm to do, really, until we get towards the draft, unless they want to try and cook up anything trade-wise. As um, head coach Noel Quinn and general manager Talisa Ray hosted a press conference with the local media a month ago or so, a few weeks ago. And Noel Quinn hinted that Talisa might have something up her sleeve in terms of a trade. We haven't gotten that since. So I don't really know um, if anything's coming or when it might. So, the only other thing storm related is that there was something with Nika Mule. If I can find it. Nika obviously suffered a knee injury in Turkey, playing overseas. Um, Unfortunately, there was the whole free Nika thing in the off season. No, during the season, sorry. Um, there was this hope that she would get some more minutes. Didn't really do that. And this offseason she was, hopefully going to showcase her talent, improve her game a bit more. First game in Turkey, brutal knee injury. She will not play for the team in 2025, but she's been busy, including this news. Under Armour adds Nika to its athletic roster. There was a photo shoot with a bunch of Under Armour stuff. Um, they announced on the 5th that it's added Nika Mule, known by fans as the Secretary of Defense. There's even a photo of her at a desk with a name tag that says Secretary of Defense. Um, Signing her to a multi-year partnership. And now she will serve as an ambassador both on and off the court, wearing Under Armour and Curry brand basketball shoes. It says this season, but she's not playing this season. So, you know, um, yeah, I mean it's interesting because she's been a Nike athlete when she was at UConn. Does have some history for Under Armour, but you know, yeah, I mean, that's interesting to see. It is something related to the storm. So glad to do that in our wrap-up show as opposed to some wrap-up shows that don't include the storm really much at all. Keep it going, and talk about our Seattle Kraken, who, up there with the Seattle Seahawks, had a really unique day. Um, the NHL trade deadline is on Friday at noon Pacific time. And the Kraken have been way out of the playoff picture for months. Anybody who thinks that the team is just now giving up on the season, I'm sorry, friend, but you're a little behind. It was always going to be a question of how much, not if, the team sells. With Brandon Tanev and Yanni Gourde, two forwards who are going to be free agents at the end of this season, at the center of trade talks really for the last few months and with Seattle being out of things. Um, Another name that I've floated on our show, Keeping Up with the Seattle Kraken, Oliver Bjorkstrand, who has value and I believe is on a contract through next season. I will double check that so I don't just say I believe and then I'm just like any other aggregator account that just thinks that they can do the job that we do, right? Bjorkstrand, who had value, um, I thought he was somebody that the team could trade, because he's played really well, because he's under contract. Let's find him here. Oh, they don't have him. There he is. Yep, he's under contract through next season. So I thought he could go to a team, and I just didn't think he'd be bundled with Yanni Gourde. So the Kraken have sent Yanni Gourde, Oliver Bjorkstrand, and a fifth round pick in the 2026, draft to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Yanni Gourde goes back to Tampa Bay after being selected there by the Kraken in the expansion draft back in 2021. Seattle receives a bundle of high draft picks, first rounders in the 2026 and 2027 drafts, as well as a second rounder in this year's draft that previously belonged to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Um, Side note, with this move, Tampa Bay doesn't have a first rounder to offer them for a few years because they already didn't have it coming into these discussions. So they got those draft picks and Ford Michael Isamont. I'm gonna make sure I'm saying that correctly. Okay. I went and checked, and Isamont, I'm pretty sure I said it right correctly. Right the first time. Sorry. So they got those high draft picks as well as Michael Asamont. A former fifth rounder. He's 28 years old. His point production isn't great, just 10 points, five goals, and 44 penalty minutes across 57 regular season games with Tampa Bay. He is a free agent at the end of the year, so it's not like Seattle's tied to him going forward. He's kind of described as a bottom six guy that shoots the puck. His shooting percentage, I think, now on Seattle is the highest percentage of any player on the team right now, which is fascinating. So he shoots the puck a lot, which is great. You wish the other guys would learn that as well, and maybe they will take after him in that regard. But he's a bottom six guy. He's got a lot of energy. I was going to look up pronunciation for his name, and instead I found a lot of fight videos. So he's not afraid to drop the gloves. If you like that kind of player, there you go. Um, but he's referred to as an energy guy. He can chip in offensively. He's an agitator, as I mentioned with the fights. Can play either side of the wing. Um, so, that's it's not a bad player. Again, though, Seattle is not tied to him. Um, excuse me, going forward because he's a free agent at the end of the year. With this deal, the Kraken clear over $10 million in salary. So that's big for a team that will probably do a lot in the off season to improve and try to turn things around. Again, on numerous occasions, the franchise has said they are retooling. They're not going to rebuild. They want to win now for a multitude of reasons that I talk about on Keeping Up with the Seattle Kraken, our weekly Seattle Kraken show. This is a three-team trade that includes the Detroit Red Wings. The Detroit Red Wings take the infamous chair in the corner of the room. I will not say the word that goes with that. Seattle retains 50% of Gord's salary. Detroit will retain 25% of it for their troubles. The Red Wings received a draft pick in this arrangement. Um, so it's pretty interesting. Obviously the Kraken are going to be sellers. And with a few of the deals that took place over the course of the last few days, it was pretty obvious that it was going to be a seller's market. So it's really cool to see that the Kraken are going to take advantage of that, just because they've had largely the same group of players since year one. They didn't really turn and burn and trade a bunch of guys over the course of the after the expansion draft because they really couldn't, because teams saw what Vegas did and they wisened up. Um, excuse me. Um, where did I go? Oh yeah, and it hasn't worked consistently. There was the year two blip. It was not a consistency. It was it was an outlier. for Seattle. A bunch of guys had career years. They went to the playoffs. Yes, they took the Dallas Stars to a game seven in the second round, and they haven't been able to sniff the playoffs since then. Um, so it's been necessary that they go and change things. And they're starting to do that here. So the full details, the first round picks in 2026 and 27 are both top 10 protected. If either of those first round picks is in the top 10, it slides back 1 year. Both picks could slide to 2028 and 2029. Seattle gains an additional third from Tampa Bay if those things do occur. And if it happens twice, they get that additional third round pick twice. So it all works out for Seattle. It's pretty good what happened here. Um, I will take this moment now to say that and I know there are a lot of fans who are sad about this, and understandably so. You know, the Kraken have had a lot of this, as I mentioned, they've had a lot of their same players since day one, and the fans have been endeared by them. You know, especially these two guys who were part of that 20, 37, 22 line that I remember. I think it was 2 years ago that Dave Hacksaw referred to them as like brothers, and that when they fight like cats and dogs, and then the next minute they're like brothers. So that wasn't the verbatim tweet, I mean quote, but you know, important there. So see if I can get more details. I think that was the most important thing was the sliding back, um, and them being top 10 protected. So yep, yep. Uh, okay, so that's all that. Yes, I got that down. No retained salary on Bjorkstrand is pretty nice, you know, and then the compensatory picks if the first rounders slide back a year. Um, it's good. Ron Francis did good with this. And again, as I was saying, you know, to the fans that are upset, I understand it. Yanni Gourde was both of these players were great human beings to interact with. Their families were wonderful. Um, Yanni was great to me. I remember doing a story on him when he went and visited a school in the Seattle area, and I talked to him about being a girl dad because the rivalry series was coming to Climate Pledge Arena, and he was great then, and he was always great to chat with. I love talking to him. Oliver Bjorkstrand, one of Seattle's few All-Stars in their franchise history, the Maestro. Both great fan favorites, so it'll be great that they have each other to deal with. So, um, also, Kate Shefty of the Seattle Times seemed to get some exclusive talk with General Manager Ron Francis. One of the notable pieces of information was that Yanni Gordon never had an offer from Seattle in front of him. Well, last night, if we're talking about the fifth, on the fourth, in after the loss to the Minnesota Wild, Yanni Gourde said that he confirmed that there had been contract talks in terms of an extension when asked about it, but didn't go any further than that, didn't mention it at all. Basically, just said, "That's all I'm gonna say." Um, Francis said that they wanted to see if they could get this Tampa Bay deal done, this trade, and if it didn't work out, they'd make their own pitch for an extension. So that's interesting. There are a few notes that Shefty had. So again, because it's exclusive, it's all Kate Shefty's work, and we'll get to that. Ron, you know, Kate did a great job here talking to Ron about this deadline. I really wish that we would all had availability to this, but what are you gonna do? There were some fans that we had that were like, "Hey, what are these picks gonna do to us now?" I'm like, "Well, I don't think they're gonna be used right away." Uh, um, You know, I think the betterment of the franchise going forward is what's important here. And Ron kind of agreed with that. He said, I'm hoping we can parlay some of these picks into players to move us forward. So, again, I imagine that Seattle is basically going again with the whole retooling thing. People didn't like that term. It's what they're doing. Um, you know, further on the extension thing, Ron said, I told him this morning that I had a price in mind, that I thought if we could get that price, then it made sense to do the deal. If I couldn't get the price that we were looking for, then I would have turned and tried to get him signed. He mentioned, the Gourde liked it here. They're probably in a good chance to get it done. But again, really hammering home that they wanted to get this deal done. Um, and to help move them forward in the off season. So he also said that he wasn't in any hurry to get Oliver in a deal, which is fascinating. Um, he said ultimately the value was too good to turn down. Yeah, I mean, he's a middle 6'4". He's 29. I've talked at length about how valuable Bjorkstrand has been and the kind of player that he is, and how every championship team has a similar player. So, Tampa Bay gets better now. Seattle gets some tools and resources that they can use to make themselves better next season and hopefully going forward. Um, mm, 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 mm. So also what was interesting was that Francis seemed to indicate that he's more interested in player for player deals as opposed to acquiring draft picks. Um, so again with the retooling, um, it's very fascinating. Um, I know they said getting better in the future. It seems like, again, the emphasis on them winning in the now, in the near future, is very evident. Um, Francis said he's not necessarily looking to move a lot of players with contract years remaining for picks. I don't think that does us any good here, is what he said to Kate. Um, and then there was some worry about Jared McCann and the possibility of him being traded. And Ron said, we're not looking to move Mr. McCann at this point. So um, there's that. After those trades became official, the Kraken did recall forwards Ben Myers and Jacob Melanson from HL affiliate Coachella Valley. So when Melanson hits the ice for the first time for a game, it will be his NHL debut. He's a guy who, has been described as an agitator, brings some sandpaper to use some hockey terminology in that sort of sense. Um, so kind of fitting that a guy like Yanni Gourde, who does the same thing, goes and they bring in Melanson, and he's a guy that kind of seemed like he'd come up at some point this year anyway. So cool to see that. Myers has been a consistent at the lineup in times here. It's really been Mitchell Stevens and Ben Myers switching at times. Really, as Gourde has been hurt, or if other forwards have been hurt, the Kraken have leaned on calling them up, so that was somewhat notable. So that's it for the Kraken. They do play tomorrow, March 6th, on the road against the Nashville Predators. That game was originally on ESPN, but the NHL reslotted a bunch of games, changed some times, and gave some games to the Washington Capitals to be on ESPN with the Alexander Ovechkin chase for the all-time goal record coming nearer and nearer. So that game against the Predators, two teams that have had vastly disappointing seasons, taking place at 5 p.m. Pacific time uh, in Nashville. Sorry. To begin, I believe it's a three-game road trip. Yep, three-game road trip. That will be on the Kraken Hockey Network and Kong in if you're in the Seattle area. Going over to the Sounders, the other team who had a game today. Not a lot going on outside of them being the other team, as I mentioned, that played a game in this one. This was a tough one. It's the second leg of the round of 16 matchup in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, formerly known as the CONCACAF Champions League, which the Sounders won back in 2022, becoming the first MLS team to do so. It's different than the CONCACAF Champions League, but you can see how we got from CONCACAF Champions League to CONCACAF Champions Cup, right? It's different, but the same. Um, the Sounders were playing Cruz Azul, a Liga MX powerhouse that was without some key players. Uh, seven of their top players in Mexico City. Um, it was an interesting match being there in the press box watching this one. I was really worried. Cruz Azul, they're a powerhouse. I have a lot of respect for that club. I know my respect doesn't matter, but they showed out well. Their fans showed out really well. It was really cool to see that. The first half was a lot of the Sounders defending really hard, and I thought, okay, it just seems like Chris Azul is going to come in here and score a goal, and just they only need one and get out of here. But that's not what happened. The Sounders defended really well. They really didn't get their first real chances on goal until late into the first half, and they just narrowly missed scoring and getting on the board in that first half. Fresh into the second half, it looked like the Sounders had the first goal of the match. Um, excuse me, Cruz Azul goalkeeper Kevin Meyer um, came out of his goal box to come and play a ball, and he misplayed it terribly. And Pedro de la Vega was on it. He was there. He was ready. Was able to get around him and take a shot on goal, and it went in, but it had been called off as Paul Arriola had been called offside. So that was a big kick to some hopes there. It seemed like a really great one. Pedro was very juiced about it. He was very excited, but it didn't count. Seattle had chances throughout the second half, and I would argue had the better chances and should have scored. There were some interesting referee decisions in this one. Missed handball, the offside wasn't really decisive, among some other things. I got a text during this one from Owen Murray on our who was my co-host on Sound Waves from the Sea, our Sounders weekly show, and he said the officiating inconsistencies were incredible, and they were. Um, so it's interesting how this match went. The Sounders are going to be in four competitions this year, including the one that we saw tonight in this CONCACAF Champions Cup. They've got a lot of depth, which is great for them, but you know, um, it's early and it's pretty clear that they're working through some things, and they're trying to get some consistencies. Um, but it's tough. The Sounders were happy with how they played, but it was pretty obviously a missed opportunity to not be carrying a goal into Mexico next week. Um, it's tough. They looked pretty dominant in the second half of this one. Hit the word work a few times. Jordan Morris, sorry, yeah, Jordan Morris. I had to mention that late into the match, had a ball. He had a Cruz Azul player on his hip. He was able to get a ball past the goalkeeper, and it skittered and it skittered and it clipped the far post and went out. So no friendly bounce. Any goal on the road in leg two gives them the tiebreaker. Cruz Azul will obviously have some reinforcements on this one, and it's not going to be an easy place to play. So I don't know. It'll be a good one. I'm excited for that one, but just really big opportunity missed in this one. I had some fun writing about this one. So that's tough. That's tough. They don't play tomorrow. Their next match is in MLS regular season play on Saturday at home against LAFC. It's a 1:45 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. There is a joint press conference with the Rain and the Sounders taking place on Friday that we'll be at. So it'll be interesting to get you some information from that. We don't have anything with our Seattle Rain, so there's nothing in that regard. And I don't think there's anything else that took place today. It was a busy day, but it's always something going on. So we'll double check. This is, we go from the Sounders. Normally the Rain would be next, but with the Rain not have anything, then we get into the Seawolves and the Orcas and the Tempest and the Cascade. All of those teams. The Seawolves in the regular season, but it's the middle of the week, so there's not much of information to go about from there. Um, Oh, yes, no, I was wrong. The Orcas, Seattle's Major League Cricket team that isn't in Seattle quite yet. They're supposed to be playing in Merrimore Park next year. So we will try to get something on that out. That's a good update. I have to take care of that. Matthew Mott was announced as head coach of the Seattle Orcas on the 5th. Yes, there we go. Okay, nice. Um, excuse me. He's an Australian international. Mott joins the team ahead of the third season of Major League Cricket and will officially take charge after completing his current role as assistant coach of the Delhi Capitals in the Indian Premier League. So there's some decent experience here. He previously coached in the Australian women's national team to an ODI World Cup title and two T20 World Cup victories in between 2015 and 2022. After that, he took over as England men's white ball coach and immediately made an impact, leading them to the T20 World Cup and winning it in Australia in 2022. So nice to see some championship experience there. Coach Mott, I'm excited to be joining the Orcas for Major League Cricket. It's a fantastic opportunity to be part of a growing competition, and I can't wait to work with the players, owners, and staff at the Orcas to build towards a long-term sustainable success. Very cool. Yeah. So if you don't know, the Orcas, I don't know cricket that well, but we're gonna learn it. Um, went to the championship of Major League Cricket in its inaugural season, but they lost. Last year, they did not do very well. They didn't qualify for the playoffs, and it's a really small league. Um, so they're looking obviously to get back to some winning going on in year three. Um, and they're supposed to be in Marymore Park next year. Um, all of the Major League Cricket teams are, it's like the UFL. If you know the UFL, they all have the same like home base, and they all play their games around that home base, despite having names like Seattle. There's a New York team. So that is very cool. So, okay. Hey, there we go. Around the Sound, circling Seattle sports' new daily Seattle sports wrap-up show, professional sports. We'll start to include, excuse me, UW and our minor league coverage as well in this. So this is it for Around the Sound, March 5th. We'll improve this. I'll get better graphics. We'll probably get its own standalone thumbnail, so on and so forth going forward. But until we see you, who knows what will happen on the 6th? I never know what's going to happen with all these teams. When you cover, how do I move my fat head? 41 teams in the Seattle area, and you're really the only place that does all Seattle sports all the time, and know what you're talking about. Uh, it's a lot of work. The 5th was a lot of work. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed getting all of your Seattle sports news, Seattle pro sports news in one place for the day. And yeah, we'll see what takes place. So until we see you next time, take care of yourselves, be well, and do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Hello there, everybody. Charles Hamaker here with Circling Seattle Sports. I'm joined by Jen Barnes of Rough and Tumble that we happen to be at right now. Yeah. Jen, why don't you talk to me a little bit about what we're announcing today, which is our partnership.
I'm so excited about this. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I think all of us here at Rough and Tumble are big fans of what you and your team at Circling Seattle Sports does. And so, I know you know this, but when you came to me with this idea, it just seemed pretty natural. And it's not just me. I think a lot of people in the sports community in Seattle also really respect you and your team. So it's exciting to kind of see these two things melding together, and we're really excited to start implementing some of the things and then hopefully seeing you guys a little bit more often.
Yeah, and so with what Jen says about seeing us more often, we've got a few things in the works, but you'll see watch parties here. We'd like to do a few different of our community drives, which you'll hear about here in a little bit. From now, we've got to make our announcements one at a time. I can't drop everything.
Not everything all at once.
But this has been a home for a lot of our team, whether it's myself, our friend, our photographer Liz is behind the camera. Liz is here often, so our team has kind of adopted this place kind of like our own since I saw you at our soft launch. So, it's been great to have that support. And in a lot of ways, and part of the reason I wanted to do this was the Rough and Tumble embodies a lot of what Circling Seattle Sports wants to do. Obviously with women's sports, with the storm and the rain, but just being, having the game on, every game on.
Yep.
How much of that, did you see a line kind of even before this idea was mentioned when I first met you?
I think it's always felt like that. I mean, you and your team were here on opening night, and you just feel like you're part of the space, so it felt like really natural. And the fact that you actually cover all the sports really makes your group stand out. So you are always covering all the rain games, all the storm games. UW women's softball, UW women's basketball, UW women's hockey. We love it. So all of those things, and obviously passionate M's fans, passionate Hawks fans, and passionate Kraken and Sounders fans. So really, from our perspective, those two things meshed really well.
So, I mean, you heard it from Jen herself, but this will be our home for all of these events, whether it's you can't make it to these games at home, we're always going to direct you to Rough and Tumble, and obviously the games on the road as well. All these, I mean, we're talking about the rain. They've got their schedule out finally,
Yeah, yep.
but this will be our home for that.
Great.
The storm games on the road, this is our home
Yeah,
for all intents and purposes.
I love it.
And when I mentioned it to Jen, when I first had this idea come up, I had this idea come up wearing a pink wig
Yes, you did.
ahead of Megan Rapinoe's final regular season home game for the Reign this past year.
Yeah.
I told her it's because I wanted this to feel genuine.
Yep.
I wanted a connection to feel genuine, and it does. So
Yeah.
that's what this is. Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, and I'm so excited to finally announce this partnership.
I can't wait.